What's up, everybody? Craig Pera here, founder of the Mindful Habits System, and I am really want to pause right now and share with you my remarks on Matthew Perry's passing. As many of you know, the star of Friends, Chandler Bing, at 54 years old, died in his hot tub after a rigorous 2-hour pickleball game. And when he lived, one of the things that he said was that he wanted to be remembered for something other than friends. And he wanted to be remembered as somebody who helped other people. And that's what I want to talk about today. I want to talk about his vulnerability. And let's start. Let's listen to this clip. And talk about it.
It was a secret, I was hiding it from everybody. And the cast kind of knew and were supportive and nice and reached out to me, but I didn't know how to stop, If the police came over to my house and said, if you drink tonight, we're going to take you to jail.
He didn't know how to stop. He didn't know how to stop. And that hit me like such a punch in the face as this reminder. You're the expression in that movie, Good Will Hunting. Eventually, every man, woman maybe gets to a stage in their emotional development where that scene with Robin Williams and the other guy, Matt Damon, and Robin Williams said to him, "It's not your fault. It's not your fault. It's not your fault. It's not your fault. You didn't know the steps to take to exercise agency and control." Matthew Perry, like us, were trained to use substances, stimulation, as a way to escape pain. Listen what else he says.
I'd start packing for jail because I didn't know how to. I couldn't stop because the disease and the addiction is progressive. So it gets worse and worse.
It gets worse and worse. It gets worse and worse. And that's is an important lesson that I think in this. You may not be in that place. You might be listening to this right now and you're like, you're average, you're mediocre. But here's an important lesson that punched me in the face, and I hope it does the same for you. And it is this: either you are practicing self-care or you're practicing self-harm. To use Matthew Perry's words, it gets worse and worse unless it's getting better and better. So you've got those two realities. So if you're, in that place that, and oh, God bless, what a place. I'm okay. I'm not bad. Ask yourself, am I on the right track or am I on the wrong track? And what if I lived the life where I had to pick? Because as Matthew Perry says, who became an addiction expert in his own right and lectured to millions of people about his disease, and we'll talk about that in a second, the toll on his body, right? And if you're listening, think of the toll your behavior has had on your life. And that's what this is. For me, this is an opportunity to reflect and honor him because those were his wishes. He said that he wanted to be known for something else. And this is really beautiful. This is a really beautiful connection that I'm having with him. I also was addicted to alcohol. I also was addicted to opiates. And I, like you maybe, self-harm. Because if it's not self-care, it's self-harm. Let's listen to see what else he has to say.
You grow older, so I could handle it kind of when we started at 24. But by the time I was 34, I was, really entrenched in a lot of trouble. But there were years that I was sober.
So I want to talk real quick about the cumulative effect. And the cumulative effect of wrong track is disconnection. The opposite of sobriety isn't, the opposite of addiction isn't sobriety, it's connection. Right? It's connection. So the long-term aggregate impact of wrong track is disconnection, is isolation, is like everything that you're trying to numb, cope, and escape from and trying to avoid will produce that outcome, which is absolutely wild. All right, let's see what else he has to say.
During that time, the year, it's pretty interesting. The year, season 9 was the year that I was sober the whole way through. And I would ask you to guess which season I got nominated for Best Actor. Season 9.
So the only season that he got nominated for an Emmy was season 9 when he was sober and living his best life and being vulnerable. There's so much to connect here with.
Yeah. I was like, that should tell me something.
Yeah. I, as I was thinking about what I wanted to say today, I reflected on the things that I think a lot of us have in common. I've listened, and I encourage you to listen to his videos. You can go on YouTube and share, just Matthew Perry Addiction. You'll see a number of really powerful presentations. I looked at some of the shorter clips, and I'm going to go back and listen to some of the longer ones later. But a couple things that stand out, right, that I think we all have in common. We think we're alone, right? At my lowest point, I was certain in the fiber of my being that there was no one who understood what I was going through. I was alone. And you're not, right? Hopefully by now, you're not alone. Everybody is struggling. The more work that I've done and the more clients that I've worked with, right? Every walk of life, every religious group, I don't know about every income level, but people from all walks of life. And I've learned how many people are actually suffering. And let's take our religious leaders just for a second regarding the issue that may have brought you here, compulsive sexual behavior, sex addiction, and porn addiction. There is a study that says, a self-reported study, where 50% of religious leaders said they struggled with pornography. 67% of youth leaders, Christian religious leaders, struggled with porn addiction. And remember that when you're out there in the world, please remember that when you are out there in the world. That has been one of the gifts of connecting with my pain and suffering is that everybody's going through something. Everybody is going through something. And on the outside, things may look perfect. Look at Matthew Perry. He had it all. He had everything. Matt's life was we dream about it, dream of that success and having that impact, especially us men who maybe present as extroverts, but are introverts on the inside or have a strong need for significance. You can just, the notches, like an incredible life. Yet so much suffering. He thought he was alone, and he wasn't. You're not alone. You're not alone. If you think you're alone, then that's a sign that you're lonely, and let it be a call to action. Let it be that reaction, right? Let it be that moment of agency and control. Let it be that realization. Wait, I think I'm alone. No, I'm going to find community. I'm going to find community. The other thing that he talked about in one of his videos, which just hit me really hard, was when he realized it wasn't his fault. Now, this gets tricky. If you talk to Robert Sapolsky, MacArthur fellow, genius fellow, professor of biology at Stanford University, one of the most prestigious universities in the world, says, not only is it not our fault, we don't even have free will. We're going to do another broadcast on that. We're going to do another broadcast on Robert Sapolsky's new book, Determined, where he says that not only is this not your fault, but we don't have free will at all. There's no neuron fires independently. Every neuron that fires in relation and in response to something else. Right. And when you think of the training, and that's the way I like to think of family of origin, root cause, how you learn to attach, right? What was your training to lie, to numb, to cope and escape? And that automatic, instantaneous reaction that you have in the moment and your response to it, brother, sister, that is not your fault. The more you learn about cognitive distortions, the more you learn about subpersonalities and parts, the more you learn about the physiology of fear, the more you learn about how habits are a critical necessity for us to function. We need habits. We could not grab this water bottle so skillfully and so quickly if it wasn't for train condition responses. Well, those same train condition responses happen when we self-deprecate, when we make a mistake, in response to stress, anxiety, also known as the physiology of fear. For us men, we're literally talking about your oldest and most impactful habit. Your oldest and most impactful habit. So while you may think it's your fault, I offer you an alternative. Take ownership for the results. Take ownership of gaining control. But my proposition to you is this, that the hiding, right? We're talking us men here. For us men, using pleasure to escape pain, in particular touching our penis, and hiding it, is in fact your oldest and most impactful habit. And what I mean by that is the lying about it is the default, right? You get a phone or a computer or a technological device with different default, right? You understand what a default is. That's the default. The default is hiding it. The default is lying about it. And that's not an excuse. That is critical, I believe, in order to understand the gravity of the problem that you are trying to solve. In summary, one of Matthew Perry's greatest teachings he talks about in one of his videos, when he learned it wasn't his fault. And what that gave him is the opportunity to forgive himself, because blaming himself made it worse. There comes a moment in everyone's development where you realize, wait a minute, beating myself up, that compliance arm of the organization, if you will, beating myself into submission is actually making it worse. And the more you learn, the more you realize that automatic instantaneous response is trained, it is conditioned, it is going to happen. It's not your fault, but guess what? Here's the great part. The great part is you can use your awareness of that automatic instantaneous reaction that you have, your trigger, your thoughts, how it feels in your body. And you can use that to, as the call to action, as the, like Rob says, right? Understanding cognitive distortions was a game changer for him because those reactions that he had names. That automatic, instantaneous catastrophizing, black and white thinking, personalizing, et cetera, et cetera. Wait a minute. Not only do these reactions have names, there's a scientific explanation from them, the physiology of fear, trained conditioned responses. Okay, you're going to have them. You're going to have them. That's not your fault. When I have a thought in my head after I make a mistake, and that first thought is, you piece of shit, right? That's not my fault. Or if I have a thought where I imagine putting on fake glasses with a fake mustache, covering up my tattoos so I could go to a strip club, those thoughts aren't my fault. But if I run with them, if I don't counter them, even though I have the skill set and the ability to do so, right? If I believe those thoughts, if I allow those thoughts to define my sanity, yeah, that's on me. That's on me. So, like Matthew Perry said, it's not our fault. The other thing that I really connected with that he talked about was how much he hated himself. He hated himself so much that he hurt himself. He talks about the colonoscopy bag. He talks about the pancreatitis, a host of medical problems that he suffered from despite knowing he should stop and having all the resources in the world, right? He couldn't. So much pain. And it's so hard for other people who don't understand that self-destructive nature. So I'm going to share with you, that pain sometimes the system perceives it as so bad, it's willing to do anything to escape from them. Gabor Mate has this quote where he says, addiction is not a disease nor a choice, but a coping strategy. It is meeting a need to escape from pain. It's meeting a need to escape from pain. And so it's important to understand that coping strategy. What are you coping from? Right? Why do you have to numb, cope, and escape? What's underneath this behavior? And how are you trained? Why are you hurting yourself, right? Why are you actually engaging in self-harm in order to pursue that short-term fix? Because there comes a place in many men's development where it's just porn, it's no big deal, everybody does it, all the excuses just wipe away. And when that happens, usually a guy realizes that, wait a minute, this is harming. This behavior isn't pleasurable. It's not effectively managing my libido. It's not the costs outweigh the short-term benefits. The behavior has become self-harming. Self-harming in terms of how it's impacting his partner, self-harming in terms how it's impacting that his reward mechanism, um, negatively impacting the baseline that it's creating for him around that visual stimulation. So the behavior actually, same behavior, the perception around the behavior changes, where it goes from, whatever, okay, I'm escaping, everyone does it, it's no big deal, no harm, no foul, to I am hurting myself. I should be really careful curating, nurturing, honoring, and respecting this powerful force that I have in my body, my sexual energy, and learning to appreciate that power. Anyway, I'm off on a tangent again. The other thing that I really took from Matthew Perry was his vulnerability. And I know he changed people's lives. So I wanted to honor that today by talking about him, sharing his story, and sharing how I connected with it. And so that's my invitation to you. For some of us guys, if you're following me, you might be close to my age. I'm 52. He was 54. It's really Matthew Perry's death. Matthew Perry's death has reminded me of my favorite expression, memento mori. Memento mori. And that's, whenever somebody passes, whenever somebody dies, I reflect on my death. I am certain that the abuse that my body has suffered over the years is going to impact my longevity. I just know the early onset Barrett's esophagus, the chronic inflammatory conditions, the, Crohn's anyway, you guys have heard the list over and over again. And, all of us, our day is going to come. Our day is going to come. And when it does, I want to do everything in my power to know I did my best to make things right, that I lived, I loved, I was a good husband, a good father, good grandfather. Those are the memories I want to have. And so reflecting on death isn't a morbid thing. It's a reminder that every day is truly special. Every day is a gift. Matthew Perry didn't know when he played that pickleball game and went into his hot tub like he does all the time, didn't know that that would be his last day. But I know if there was a moment before he passed where he reflected on the lives of the people that he saved, personally saved. There's all sorts of people out there talking about how he reached out to them at their lowest moment. And so I want to be more like Matthew Perry, and I hope you do too, in the sense, be vulnerable. Men, be vulnerable. Your life is richer. We don't need these big walls. We're not protecting ourselves against bears and tigers anymore, right? We don't have to numb, cope, and escape, right? What if the new definition of masculinity, so says this awkward guy with his hands flopping all over the place that you've been watching? Who am I to define masculinity? But if you're going to define it as hard, if you're going to define masculinity as doing things that are hard, that are difficult, this is hard, right? Controlling this powerful force is hard. Living your best life is hard. Being open about your feelings, being vulnerable. For some of us, vulnerability was literally beaten out of us. For some of us men, vulnerability was literally physically beaten out of us, emotionally beaten out of us. And lo and behold, guess what? It is a critically important attribute, skill set, feeling, state of mind, according to researcher Brene Brown in her TED Talk, The Power of Vulnerability. She proves it. Listen to it. You will have no ambiguity on the issue. It'll be case closed. It'll be case closed. Listening to this block of words that I'm sharing with you and listening to Brene Brown's TED Talk on the power of vulnerability, you will see the overwhelming data. The opposite of addiction isn't sobriety, it's connection. It's not just connection, it is the vulnerability that comes from that connection. It is the vulnerability that comes from accountability, from sharing your failures with someone else, sharing your problems with someone else, right? Having someone to lean on, open up. I'm scared. I don't know what to do right now. That's vulnerability. That's vulnerability. So thank you, Matthew, for sharing your pain with us. Thank you guys for listening. If you have any questions, put them in the chat. And it is truly an honor and privilege. You guys know the website, mindfulhabithelp.com. The podcast is Sex Afflictions and Porn Addictions. And for Brother Rob, who's joining me live, welcome, welcome, welcome. And please feel free to subscribe, however it is that you subscribe or follow, and you'll get notifications when I go live. And I would be grateful and honored to continue this conversation, to answer your questions. And if anybody has any questions now, put them in the chat, and I'll sit tight for a minute and answer them. If not, we'll call it. Rob writes in the chat, being grateful and honored. Gratitude. Here, let me just say this, okay? I believe that this is the choose your hard club, right? Whether you're watching this live, whether you're watching this later, you've made a choice, and someone may have forced you into that choice, but you've made a choice to have a desire to control this powerful force inside you. You have come for a variety of different experiences to appreciate its destructive force. You want to come and understand. You want to benefit from its constructive force. You want to be able to channel it and direct it in a powerful way. And I like to say that is so hard. The cure is the aggressive pursuit of a great life. And what I want to do now is highlight what are the different systems that might be part of your plan as you aggressively pursue a great life. So one of the things that you will learn from the book Atomic Habits, which I highly recommend, is that we do not rise to the level of our goals. We fall to the level of our systems. So if you work for a living, you're part of an organization that has systems, routines, policies and procedures, accountability, redundancy plans, et cetera, that produce the output of whatever it is that, widgets. The machine makes widgets or sells insurance or sells cars or helps people solve their IT problems. There are policies, procedures, and processes in place that produce that output. And so what are the attributes of your system? And here they are. Here is examples of categories that you might pay attention to at the 10,000 foot level. Each one of these categories has evidence behind it that supports its impact on things like longevity, self-control, emotional intelligence, well-being, et cetera, et cetera. So here's one. First, gratitude. What gratitude does is it gives you perspective. You're half full. With gratitude, your life is half full. Without gratitude, if it's half empty. That has a big impact on whether or not you're able to control yourself. So that's what gratitude does. You've heard the opposite of addiction isn't sobriety, it's community, it's connection, right? And so within that connection is your relationships, your community, your personal community, your connections, right? Those connections are really, really important. And I could see at 1,000 feet, right? You checking in, okay, here's how I'm doing regarding connections. Now, and within that, right, you can spike this out, or you could have it within that. That's so important is vulnerability. Am I being vulnerable within those communities? Am I leading? Am I sharing? Am I stuffing things down? What are my top 5 fears? Have I told anybody about them, right? Am I being vulnerable? Is my heart open? Is it closed? With that vulnerability, another attribute that drives vulnerability is accountability, right? So if you've got your system that builds widgets, you can't just let everybody on just go do what they do, right? Here you go, they'll figure it out. No, there has to be accountability, right? Things have to be measured because what gets measured gets done. And the problem here is that too many people have accountability on the break a habit side, or excuse me, most people don't have accountability at all. They don't have an ally in their life. They don't have a mentor in their life. They don't have another man that they're vulnerable with, sharing ups, downs, highs, lows, pros, cons. And so there's and we're in the middle of a loneliness epidemic, so that's got to be relevant, right? This helps cure that. But if they do have accountability, it is too heavily focused on the the break a habit part of the equation. The break a habit part of the equation is I'm not going to do the thing. I'm not going to play video games as much. I'm not going to watch porn. I'm not going to, call escorts. I'm not going to, eat as much, right? The things you don't want to do. But here's the problem. You only accomplish that by creating other habits. So accountability is absolutely critical. Another critical component of your system might be what we call parts management. And if you've seen the Pixar movie Inside Out, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But that movie generally reflects the science that says we have inside us different parts. For example, you have a part inside you that we'll call addict, another part that we'll call liar. Another part that we'll call anger. We'll have another part that we'll call shut down, right? The part of you that shuts down. The part of you that oogles and objectifies. The part of you that feels like an imposter. So we have all these different parts of us. And guess what? If you feel that way, it's true. You do. There is ample science behind this principle, memorialized in the evidence-based behavior change modality called the internal family systems model. The internal family systems model reflects the latest science and recognizes and provides you with a framework to manage your parts. So I have come to the conclusion, based upon my colossal life of failures, is parts management. You must have a system that helps you manage, lead, evolve these different parts going forward. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, pick up the book No Bad Parts by Dr. Richard Schwartz. Let me say that again. If you have never heard of the concept of parts, subpersonalities, watch the Pixar movie Inside Out and read the book No Bad Parts by Dr. Richard Schwartz. back to our list, and we'll do a recap because I know a couple people joined us. So another attribute of your system, or another like grade that you'd measure, would be self-care, self-esteem, self-love, right? You could loop that up into one, because if you just practice self-care without self-love, self-care, without, feeling good about yourself, you're screwed. You need both. You can't just take good care of yourself. I've worked with triathletes who hated themselves. Like, it was their profound sense of self-loathing that drove their behavior. And what a challenge it was to feed that right wolf with positivity, and embracing the negativity. That's actually what it comes down to, learning to channel it and direct it without the lingering costs, right? Without the damage. You can do it. So self-care. Purpose is another category, right? People who have purpose live healthier, better, longer lives. So let me go through the list, okay? Last one I forgot to mention, routines. Whatever system that you're going to create must have routines, because your execution on those routines are going to tell you whether you're on the right track or whether you're on the wrong track, right? And another attribute of your system is going to include metrics. What are you measuring? How are you measuring it? With whom? Where's the accountability? Where's the, what do they say in IT? Where's the double, triple, quadruple redundancy if the system breaks down? And depending upon your level of brokenness, like me, that level, you may have multiple levels, right? Multiple plans to make sure that when you go off track, you're able to get right back on. So let me go through the list again. Take this list down. Think about, what are your categories? The purpose of me sharing this list isn't because I'm telling you what your systems should be. No, I'm giving you ideas. So here are the different parts of the system. One, gratitude. Should gratitude be part of your system? Should you be measuring your execution in the gratitude area on a monthly, weekly, or quarterly basis? Is gratitude important enough to, hey, let me see how I'm doing? Very important to me. Gratitude brings perspective. Perspective brings peace of mind. Routines, right? Does your system need to contain routines to make sure the stuff that you want to get done is getting done, and would be what you're measuring, et cetera, et cetera? Yes, obviously your system needs routines. I put that in the mandatory category. What else? Another aspect of your system, since the opposite of addiction is in sobriety, it's connection, would be that, measuring connection. How are your connections? How are your relationships? Are you being proactive? Are you being vulnerable? Are you putting yourself out there? And another aspect of the system related to routines and really is accountability. How are you holding yourself accountable to make sure you're staying on the right track? And that's not a punitive thing, not at all. That is a wonderful, beautiful, smart, intelligent thing, because you wouldn't dream about not doing it professionally. If anybody listening has managed other people, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Or if you've been managed, you know when your boss isn't there, things slide. You don't pay as much attention. You're less diligent. I know there are a few exceptions, but those exceptions are few and far between. So accountability and metrics are critical components of the system. Another aspect of the system is parts management, learning to manage these reactive parts, these parts that produce cognitive distortions that Rob talks about in the chat, how understanding cognitive distortions changed the game for him. Absolutely critical. Applying that to the parts work will absolutely change your life. The next mandatory attribute of the system is self-care and self-love or self-esteem. How do you feel about yourself? Are you taking good care of yourself? Back to where we started talking about from a systems perspective, are you practicing self-care or are you practicing self-harm, right? That is a critical component of your system. And purpose is another critical component of your system. People who are in their purpose are less likely to be using pornography to numb, cope, and escape. They'll have more self-control. They'll feel less bad about themselves because they have a vision. They have a goal. Now, that doesn't mean plenty of people in their purpose fall off track and use porn, use sex to numb, cope, and escape. And it's not any one of these things. It's a combination. And that's what I'm inviting you to figure out. What is your combination? What should you be paying attention to? The last attribute of the system is mindfulness. That's so important for somebody that they might spike that out. They say, I got to pay attention to my mindfulness game. Am I sitting? Am I concentrating? Am I training that brain to not automatically, instantaneously react? Yes. Wonderful. Wonderful. Mission accomplished. So if you go back and play that list back, you may say to yourself, son of a gun, this is complicated and this is hard. I say to you, you are correct. This is complicated. This is hard. If you want to channel and direct your most powerful force inside you, your sexual energy, in light of the training that we've had to channel and direct it that brought you here in the first place, that's hard. That's hard. That's the aggressive pursuit of a great life. We're talking about your oldest and most impactful habit, not an excuse, but a call to action. And it is an honor and it is a privilege to be sharing this journey with you, brothers. And Rob, who's here joining us live, peace and love, my man. I will see you on the next broadcast. Thank you all for listening. Embrace your power of choice and feed the right wolf inside you. Bye, everybody.